All right, diving right in. Today, we're looking at the world of a JSON developer. And, I always thought coding was like building something completely new from nothing, but this feels different.
Yeah, it is a bit different.
It's more like figuring out the language between different systems, right? Like how apps talk to each other, all that data going back and forth.
It's like being the architect of communication for the internet, essentially.
Exactly. Okay, so we've got some cool material to dig into about this. And honestly, before we even get into the specifics, it already feels pretty relevant, right? Like everyone uses apps, everyone relies on websites working smoothly.
It's the glue that holds so much of our digital world together. But it happens behind the scenes, so most people don't even realize it's there.
Totally. So let's start with the basics. When we say JSON developer, who are we talking about? What do they actually do all day?
Okay, so at the core, a JSON developer is kind of like a translator, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got all these different software systems, and they need to talk to each other.
Right, like my weather app needs to talk to. It's like whatever giant weather system feeds it information.
Exactly. And they don't all speak the same language, so that's where JSON comes in. It's like a universal language that all these systems can understand. Think of like different countries, each with their own language. JSON is like their shared language, so they can communicate and do business together.
Okay, so JSON is the language, and the JSON developer is the diplomat, making sure everyone is understood.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And like any good diplomat, a JSON developer needs a deep understanding of how to structure information. We're talking about designing data structures.
Ooh, that sounds kind of complicated.
It can be, but think of it like this. Imagine a library with millions of books, right? If those books weren't organized, it'd be impossible to find anything.
Total chaos.
Yeah. So a JSON developer makes sure that data is organized logically, kind of like those library books, so that when an app needs to access information, it knows exactly where to find it and can understand it.
So it's all about making the data easy to find and use. And I saw something about APIs being a big part of this whole thing.
APIs. So we've got the language that's JSON. Now we need a way for these systems to actually communicate, to send and receive messages. That's where APIs come in, application programming interfaces. They're like the messengers, the phone lines between these different systems.
The actual communication channels. Got it.
Yeah, a JSON developer will spend a lot of time building and refining these APIs, making sure that data is exchanged seamlessly, using JSON as that common language. Like if you're ordering food through an app, the app uses an API to talk to the restaurant system, see what's on the menu, process your payment, all that stuff.
Oh, wow. So every time I'm like impatiently hitting refresh on my food delivery app, it's because of an API.
Well, maybe. Or maybe the restaurant's just slow.
Yeah.
You get the idea.
I do. Okay, this is fascinating. So to sum it up, we've got the language JSON, we've got the communication channels, APIs, and we've got the data, all organized neatly like a library. But it takes a special kind of person to do all of this, right? Not just anyone can be a JSON developer. What kind of skills are we talking about?
Right. You can't just walk in and wing it. You need some serious technical chops. First off, you got to be fluent in JSON syntax. Like really fluent.
So it's not just about knowing the rules, it's about being able to use them well.
Exactly. It's the difference between speaking a language and being a poet, right? You got to be able to write clean, elegant code that's efficient and easy for other developers to understand.
Makes sense.
And then you've got a whole toolbox of like specialized tools you got to master.
Oh, like what?
Well, there's JSON Lint that's for catching errors in your code. Kind of like a spell checker, but way more powerful. Then you've got things like Postman for testing how those APIs are performing, making sure that messages are getting through loud and clear.
So it's not just about one tool, it's about knowing how to use the right tool for the right job.
Exactly. And then there are databases like MongoDB. That's where all that data is stored and managed.
Data organization on a massive scale, I'm getting it.
That's a lot to keep track of. And speaking of keeping track of things, debugging, that's a huge part of the job.
Debugging, is that what it sounds like? Like getting rid of bugs in the code?
Pretty much. It's like being a detective, but for code. Let's say an app crashes, or the data isn't being sent correctly. A JSON developer has to figure out why. They have to trace the flow of information, sometimes through thousands of lines of code, to find that one tiny error that's causing the whole thing to break down.
So they're like the emergency responders of the digital world, rushing in to fix things when they go wrong. That sounds both stressful and incredibly important.
Oh, it definitely can be both. But when you find that one line of code and fix it, and everything starts working again, It's incredibly satisfying.
I can imagine. Honestly, I'm sitting here like suddenly feeling very grateful for all the times my apps don't crash. It's easy to take for granted how much work goes into making everything run smoothly.
It really is. But that's kind of the point, right? A good JSON developer is like the wizard behind the curtain, making sure all the technology we rely on just works.
Right, like I'm never going to look at my weather app the same way again.
Exactly. Next time you're scrolling through your phone, remember there's probably a JSON developer who helped make that smooth, seamless experience possible.